Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I will present work dealing with assisted people emergency egress, which we prepared with other two colleagues of mine, Fabio Laimo Ponziani and Walter Ricci. We work with the National Fire Service in Italy, but we do this work also as a part of our PhD course with the University of Rome, Tor Vergata. So I will give a brief introduction explaining the reason underlying the work we performed. We focus on the evacuation in establishing an evacuation capabilities framework integrating persons with special needs, so not only mobility impairment, but also sensory or cognitive impairments. We applied these findings to a case study dealing with the assisted horizontal evacuation of an hospital ward. We present the Pathfinder Monte Carlo simulation results we do on our case study, and then we outline some conclusion and our future work. First of all, one slide which which is based on our statistics that our corp in Italy collected. It has. In Italy, in 2016, which is the last year for which we have the numbers analyzed, we assisted the people we have 200 all over in all the country. Well, about 200 persons assisted per day for various reasons. This is the overall number. In these 200 people, usually 1/3 is involving people with special needs, so elderly, mobility impaired, or people with sensory impairment, deaf, blind, cognitive disabilities, or a large part of the number of unspecified disability which was not possible to recover from each fire service intervention sheet. So it's a quite relevant number for, and this urged us to study, to extend also our attention to people, to this kind of, to this part of the population which is usually not addressed in egress modeling. In doing this work, you can see in this slide the path which give from not considering people having the necessity to be assisted during egress to include all these people in fire codes, and so in the preparation also of our technical specification which are established in our country. If you include only autonomous population and you focus on that part of the population, maybe you can usually fire code deals with detection, notification, or give some prescription concerning the egress capabilities, and then you can see all the people is assumed to go in some way autonomously toward a safe areas. If we want to go further and include also people with special necessity in our regulation, we have to, as it was already said yesterday and today many times, we have to put a different approach on notification, because we have to reach people having, for example, sensory or cognitive impairment. We have to consider also mobility device, because we have people with mobility impairments. We have also problems of wayfinding, because people can have not autonomous capacity to reach the safe location, or has difficulty in reaching the safe location in a rapid, in a fast way. So one colleague of mine said that all over the world, internationally, we put a lot of emphasis on accessibility of building, but maybe sometimes we forgot to remember that in emergency, people with special needs have to escape from the building and have to do it in a faster way than is usually necessary to get the access to a building. So we have also to consider that in this process we have to include also assistance, the intervention of external people who bring assistance to the occupants in order to start these egress movements. In some way we can allow also, for example, the use of elevators, which usually prohibited for in all fire courts, but for example in hospitals are in some way part of the evacuation strategy. This is a slide that highlights the fact that, for example, during intervention, in our intervention, we have to deal with several type of disability, person with disabilities, and we now start our technical discussion. It's necessary in some way, as a first point, to get a general synthetic disability classification, which can be, which we can establish, for example, following a guide from NFPA, which was released 2 years ago. We have similar documents also in Italy, and I'm sure in every country, but this get an idea of the various occupant profile which have special needs during egress or during emergency when you are a firefighter, and then you have to bring help to them. And the last row remember us that temporary disability is also a temporary condition which can affect each of us, including the people which is usually not autonomous in egress. We put a lot of emphasis on this matter also in training our firefighters to approach correctly people in emergency. This is I put only this slide because this is a work beginning in 2002, so we have almost 15 years of exchange with the association and people in order to improve our training assistance during emergency evacuation. We use the term meta communication to indicate that it's not only listen, hear, but also approach in a correct way people in order that when there is an emergency, they follow your instruction and you can bring help to them in an efficient way. Having this in mind, we, as a first step, establish an occupants of evacuation capabilities framework, which in some way is a basic framework, but try to include not only autonomous people in our egress modeling, but also start to include people which can be autonomous with mobility devices, people who need assistance in wayfinding during emergency because you want to bring them in a fast way outside the building in emergency. And so in that case, it's not an autonomous, it's autonomous in mobility, but it's not autonomous in the moment that it needs the help of an assistant to start its movement. 1 or 2 people, depends on the cases. You can go further, and then you can include also people with major mobility device required, so wheelchair, stretcher, etc. You can increase the number of operators which are required to, in that case, to prepare the people to be transported and then to transport them. So in this case, specific case, you have 2 phases which are combined before these people can brought to a safe area. In some cases, you can use these divides only on a horizontal only in a horizontal path. In other cases, you can also use these, for example, for stair travel device. You can also use this device to go through a stairwell. And then we have the last cases, main cases, which is people which is not autonomous and transferable only with beds or incubators, with the assistance, obviously, of people. After having established this basic framework, we have the problem, we face the next step, which is how we can define the main characteristics of all these profile, and then we start our literature review. So you will see the result over there. Not only unhindered walking speed on level terrain, straight line movement, low density occupation, etc. These are all the things we are highlighting in this table. But we are also trying to put in evidence what is the social grouping, or some remarks that justify that we have all these classification inside what we call the autonomous occupant profile. For example, if I consider there can be in a working environment some part of the worker which are not in charge of egress assistance, while others are effectively involved in providing assistance to the occupants. We can also have emergency responders which are specifically devoted to help in case of need of an emergency. We can have in the hospital or in healthcare occupancy, we can have visitor to in pension, so there is usually certainly a strong feeling to form a group with the patient. And in this table, we have summarized some of the findings we can find easily in the literature concerning this autonomous profile. We do the same for mobility impaired occupant profile. So you can see here what are the results we have extracted from literature data. Usually you can consider these are represented by distribution law with the average, the standard deviation, the minimum and the maximum values. And then this is the last table. We found the assisted travel speed on horizontal path. Noticing that most of the data are only recently available. We found, for example, the last were presented also here in 2 years ago from Hunt. In this way, we have more or less, using this table, we have a basic define a basic occupant profile concerning, for what concerns travel speeds, and a minimum set of the profile you must consider, you must include in your simulation model. In the last column, you see also when assistance is required, you have also to define the number, what number of people is providing assistance. This is the summary of all together, all the profile we are considering for our base case study. These are, in the first part, you can find the autonomous profile. This is a slide for showing how we can set in the input file the data we are showed in the previous tables. We do the same with the autonomous profile, with the mobility impaired. So in this case, we have to define also the vehicle shape. And third, we have assisted the evacuation profile, including also ambulant profile, which need assistance. In some way, you can have a complete basic complete set of occupant profile which will be used next in the course of simulation. Obviously, you can also go much further than we did now. You can introduce age or gender differentiation according to your need. This will multiply this occupant profile and will multiply accordingly the number of data you must input into the model. This is a remark for a Pathfinder user. You currently doesn't allow to assist. Okay, reverse. Pathfinder currently allows to assist only mobility per occupant. So if I have one autonomous profile, how can I do this? Here it's shown how to do this with the actual version. You can define occupant profile with a polygonal shape, associate a virtual vehicle shape which has the shape of a person, for example, an octagon, and then you can specify the number of assistants which is required to assist these ambulant profiles. This is an exemplification to show it in the case one assistant is foreseen. We have seen also today that it's important to consider basic movement groups. In this case, for example, it's likely that visitors remain together with impatient and do not start autonomous evacuation without leaving his impatient. So these are the movement group we considered. We consider all these possibilities. And for we have the same table for involving assisted occupants. In that case, we stipulated that only one agent of that type is put in relationship with one or more autonomous profiles. So in this case, you can have, doing this, you have the possibility to model also movement groups. Also, this brings some necessity to comply with the actual Pathfinder version. It's necessary to do some work in order to allow to introduce to simulate these group moments involving autonomous profile with assisted profile. And here is shown the way in which we done with the actual version. That is, we duplicate the autonomous profile only for assisted group movements, define the necessity to have an axis, to call for axis, and so we define a vehicle shape. And then in this case, we do not define the number of assistants because it's not necessary. The program will only issue a warning, but will not stop, so the things will do as we will proceed. The simulation will run as we like. This is next step when you consider assisted evacuation is to define evacuation team profile in order that you can provide assistance to selected type of occupants, and you can also define the possibility, for example, to introduce a restriction in travel path choice or use of the elevators in emergency. So with a few with this type of approach, you can model a lot of things that are in reality used in strategy planning. This is the way in which we can transfer this translate this into Pathfinder. And here is shown that in Pathfinder, but also in other codes, you have to define also the service discipline, that is which is the client which is served before, on which basis, and you can also make this translate these rules into action which naturally emerge from during the simulation. Oops, sorry. And this is the way in which, in the behaviors, you define for the assisted occupants the necessity to have a team, and you can assign an evacuation team to do the job. Last part is concerning pre-evacuation times, which was also dealt tomorrow. It's important today in the morning. It's important to say that we have also data specific for in this case, for the healthcare occupancies concerning active staff and emergency response pre-evacuation time. In this case, is a response time. Pre-evacuation is a response time. Again, distribution law, you do the same. We do. This is the way in which we introduce this in Pathfinder, so it's quite easily. Same you can do for all the other autonomous profile. Again, we use the ISO technical report for data range for awake and unfamiliar profile in level M1 occupancy, which is typical for hospitals. Again, this is the way in which we prepare the input in Pathfinder. And all the final table is the preparation time for assisted occupants. So having put all together, this is the way in which we translate again into the program, noting that the preparation time starts only when the assisting team is completed, has reached the patient and is completing his work. So there is a specific point which you must input this in order to get your solution. This is finally the case study. We have two words. This is taken mainly from handwork in 2016, but we divided also into the compartment in order to allow that this configuration is compliant, for example, for our technical rules, but also for NFPA, for the life safety codes, which requires that each ward has two exit, one in this case through a stairwell and the other through an horizontal exit to the other ward. In this case, we model a relocation of the patients from ward 1 to ward 2. You can have a look on the various population involved in this simulation. People will have to follow, occupants have to follow one of the two routes. We define that from room 1 to 4, they go mainly through the stairway or the safe areas on the landing, and the other part, the other room, go in the other ward, in ward 2. You also take the possibility to define wait time, because we have to pass through fire doors. Usually we're using mobility device like bed. It's not so easy, so we can delay the motion of people when passing through the doors. And define, okay, I will go further. We define 10 group moments schemes involving or only autonomous or assisted and autonomous profile altogether. This is the final relocation plan which we expected to reproduce. Not that in the hospital this strategy is mandated by the management, so people usually is not, so the patient cannot have not the problem of to find the route, but the route in some way is in the safety plan predefined. This is to show how much the number of behaviors that even simple basic rules provide. We make, I have no time, but we make also a lot of struggling with the notion of refuge area, which was introduced in the latest version of Pathfinder, because in some cases the capacity of the refuge will preclude the team to enter into the refuge areas, simply because there is an equivalent number of people associated to the mobility device, which precludes in some way the functionality. So you have we solve this problem defining in some way increasing the capacity of the refuge, but this must we believe must be solved in future release of of the software. Another problem is that when you include assisted occupants together with the autonomous profile, if the assisted occupants are not placed correctly inside the refuge, they can preclude the further entrance of other occupants, simply because they are left in the place where they are living. So this is a congestion which is not clearly not real. So I must go further. It's possible to overcome in some way this problem in the simulation. I go further to the result. Here we present the result. We made we use all the statistics for. We have random variables for, we have said, for the velocity and impeded velocity, for the pre-movement times that I showed in the table. They were all implemented. So we made a Monte Carlo study. We got in this study 25 simulations because we have to control each simulation to verify that we proceed correctly. And these are the results concerning the time the first and the last occupant reaches safe areas, which is on the left on the stairway, 5 occupants, and the other 13 are on the ward 2. So you can see here the time, the distribution. This clearly reflects also the pre-movement time. It's a distribution because you have a distribution of the input variables which are involved in the process. The ratio between minimum and maximum is in the range 1.5 to 0.4. And if you are interested in the overall process, when it's completed, the required time for safe egress necessary to relocate the impatiens has that distribution. That is, the minimum is about 580 seconds and the maximum is 700. This is the value. The distribution is bimodal, is multimodal. This is obviously depend on the fact that we have random variables which are combined in each simulation. And this is our conclusion is that there is always a need to include assisted evacuation not only when dealing with their occupancy, but in general, because these people we can find everywhere in every kind of occupancy. Assisted evacuation simulation can be a valuable tool helping to identify in advance critical issues, and then these studies are usually done to verify the adequacy of the staff and the procedure adopted. We present model based on literature, but it does not preclude the use of calibrated data based on the site condition. And we plan, and we have already done part of the work using another platform, agent-based platform, which can extend the behavioral rules that can be implemented. We can also consider occupant fatigue, etc. And wayfinding adapted to environmental conditions, that is visibility in, for example, inside the room. Thank you for your attention.